we have everything just the way we needed it to be today. All right, we're going to jump right into it because I want to get into. Have you ever heard the term time stopping? And if you've ever heard the term time stopping, you will know that normally it's a term used when something happens very traumatic, and when that happens, time feels like it stops. You know, you get stuck in a season, you know, where you might still be wearing shorts and all of a sudden it's winter, you know. You don't really move through the world like you used to. You kind of get, your mind doesn't, your human consciousness, it doesn't have the ability to kind of go forward, in a sense. It gets kind of frozen in this moment. Whatever it was that happened, you don't have anything to change from that moment. You see a lot of it when people don't change space for a long period of time. When something traumatic happened and they want to keep it like a tomb in a sense. You know, they don't want any of it to change. They don't want to move anything. So when this happens, our human consciousness doesn't want anything to shift, right? It wants to keep everything right the way it is. And a lot of people will call it time stopping because in a sense, the person just stopped moving through it the same way. It stopped shifting with it and changing with it. Now, it's pretty windy today, so I'm going to leave the window up, but it'll be like that scene in, what is it, Infinity War when Doctor Strange's hair starts going back and forth. This one actually is the wind and not an alien spaceship. Time stopping is one thing that kind of can move us into an ascension process. And it is one of the things that can happen to you. And if you've never had it happen to you, it's hard to really put it into words. Because I've had it happen to me a couple of times. One time in particular, I remember specifically. And then maybe another time not quite as severe. Even though it's not the same thing as like holding on. It's really just you kind of cease to shift anything you were doing from when that thing happened. Either you lost a person or you lost a job, or usually there's a loss involved. There's something that kind of marks that moment that we don't want to move forward to the next moment, you know, and that's a lot of what it can be. Now, when we start going through our awakening and our ascension, a lot of times this time stopping can start to push us toward an ascension. It might push us toward an awakening, which leads to ascension. It might just push us towards something of more clarity. Because even though, in a sense, we stop moving through time, time doesn't stop moving through us. In a sense where we still, and that's kind of a big distinction that we get to when we talk about time, is that our human consciousness thinks like time, right? And even in our ascended consciousness, sometimes we'll say that. But in a way, I feel like it's more how time moves through us, right? But we have a sense of, we do have ways to master time. I don't want to say control time, but we can master how we move through it. And just the ability to kind of stay in a moment. But we can't vibrationally stay in the moment. We can only stay in the moment by changing the external to make it look like we're still in the same moment. But it doesn't work for our frequency shifts and we're not in the moment anymore. I mean, technically we're never in the same moment. And anything we go through that causes us to kind of stop time, get off the ride, whatever you want to call it, we continue to shift and change even though everything around us kind of looks the same. And that's kind of the difference between start looking at time on the other side of it, or, you know, not really on the other side, because I don't know how many times we get to the other side and then start a different journey and start again. We get to a different spot in our ascension journey where we look at time differently, where some people call it flowing through time. I kind of like it better, how time is kind of flowing through us in a sense, and how we can slow it down and speed it up. and how we slow it down and speed it up and we don't notice what we're doing. And we do that all the time in our human consciousness. We don't understand that we're the ones that do that. You know, you've had days where, oh, it's a fast day, it's a slow day. Because we're the ones that we're mastering how that happens and why that happens. And when you get to having moments when we kind of want to stop the whole thing, but yet it marches on anyway, it's because we're kind of going about it the wrong way. Like I said, we're trying to take the external and freeze it instead of understanding that we're control how fast and how slow it goes. We're the ones that really realize that when we have a certain frequency, time slows down. When you're by yourself, time slows down. And a lot of people don't like that when they're by themselves. Like, how come when I'm around other people, things go quicker. But when I'm by myself, time slows down. Because you have your own frequency, right? And when you're with other people, no matter how close in frequency everybody is, if they are, and no one's going to be exactly where you are, everyone's still spinning in a different vibration. Everyone's still spinning differently, right? Everyone's still moving in a different pattern. Everyone's operating in their own little matrix in a sense. Now, everyone's spinning the exact same way. And if you're around humans, they're spinning the opposite direction. You want to crash time fast, get around humans and watch how fast it just collapses on itself, because we can kind of start to spin out sometimes. Like, we'll kind of spin out of time, and other times we will overcompensate our spin to compensate for everybody else's spin. And everything just kind of collapses in on itself when that happens. And you get days that are super, seem to go so fast. You didn't get anything done. Time went too fast today. If you are rushing, if you do not allow a lot of time to do something, time will collapse. Because you're basically saying to your field, there's not enough time, there's not enough time, there's not enough time. And your field returns back to you, yeah, you're right, there's not enough time. There's not enough time, there's not enough time. So it keeps squeezing it and squeezing it and squeezing it. So there is not enough time. Same thing that happens when you put yourself in a situation where it feels like it's almost like the time is getting squeezed out of something. You're out of time. What? Going to be a lot of time puns today. I can see it. Like, all of a sudden, there's no more time left. The reality's run out of time. It's not so much the reality's run out of time. It's run out of frequency. Our frequency depicts the vibration we're in. Correct? That's how that works. Our frequency depicts our field, which depicts what we get back. What we put out is what we get back. In human consciousness, we don't understand we're doing that. We don't understand that we're making it go fast, we're making it go slow, we're moving time around. We don't realize that we're doing that. We try to do it in a more of a linear fashion. Well, let me just freeze everything the same way, and then we're going to entomb the moment. Whereas in Ascension, you start to understand that we're the ones that control the moment. When you're really present with the situation, you will realize how slow time goes. And you can spend days really present and in your frequency, and time does slow down. There are some days when you feel like, wow, this day lasted forever. Look how much I got done today. Even if you're around other people, but you're still not really engaging with other people, you might find you get more done. You might find all of a sudden this day that started, there's also that reason why you start a day sometimes and you feel like when you look back on your day, the morning felt like it was like 100 years ago. Like, it could not be the same day when I started at whatever time and I did all that this morning, and now it's like only like 4 or 5 hours later, but I feel like that was 100 years ago. Like we get this feeling that the day just gets stretch out the time. We're able to take our frequency and slow it down. We're not in the human, and our brain waves are different. Your brain waves go from that beta state to that gamma state. The farther you go into your ascension process, and you start to be able to process, we move a lot slower. We just move a lot slower. It takes a lot longer to do a lot of different things than when you're human. We go back to back to back to back to back to back. I remember when I used to when I was in my human consciousness and I was doing more just, business type jobs. Remember, I booked my calendar. Every day was back to back. Like I have a meeting. I'm like, I'm not even giving myself time to go move from one meeting to the next meeting. There's no way I'm going to make it. I mean, I didn't have time to walk to the next one. It almost reminded me of in college too, where you'd have a class that ended at 1:50, but you have to be. And I went to a really large college, so I went to Virginia Tech. So I'm like, I got to track all the way across the drill field to get away in this other building all the way over here. How can I do that in 10 minutes? It's not even possible. Because that's just human culture. It's fast, let's cram as much stuff in as we can. Go, back to back to back to back to back. And when you get out of that, and you see people doing that, and you see what happens to the realities when they do that, and they have everything back to back to back to back to back, everything's assuming it's going to go perfectly to plan. Everything's going to go perfectly to plan. It's like a Bond villain. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to go exactly how it's supposed to go. This is going to take exactly 42 minutes. And then I'm going to have 4 minutes to go do this. And then I'm going to have 2 minutes to get the kids in the car. And then we're going to go to McDonald's. That's going to be exactly 5 minutes. And then I'm going to be able to get her exactly on time. But when you're in it, none of that happens. You can't find the kids. You can't. The McDonald's line is too long because we've created so much chaos in our frequency that none of it can go in that cadence or pattern, right? Because we're now, in a sense, I'm going to reverse it. We're now letting time kind of flow through us so quick that we've collapsed it down. Because we've changed our brain state to quick. This is all got to be done in this time span. And then we do that. We crush it. Anytime you do that, I will guarantee you'll crush time. In our human consciousness, we crunch time. We didn't realize that's what we were doing. And then you had the people, even if we go with the human consciousness people that were like, no, I like to get everywhere early and have plenty of time to do everything, they're still crunched and agitated by that time, the time it's taking them to do that, because it's still this thing that we want everyone to move at our same cadence because we have other people involved. If you have other people involved, everything's going to collapse. There's really not a lot of way around that unless you can sync your field with a person, and that takes some time to be able to do that. You have to really be around them for a while to sync your field, where it's not going to collapse in on itself. Because if you don't do that, it will collapse in on itself. Even if you have people, everyone can even be operating from higher consciousness. It really so much doesn't matter because the frequencies aren't matchy-matchy. Because they're not matchy-matchy, there's going to be a friction there. There's going to be someone spinning a little quicker. And that's why time's going to always be slow when you're by yourself. It just, that's how it goes. Or when you're with people who are similar enough in frequency where it can slow itself down. It always slows when you're by yourself. When you're in the master of your field and it's just you and you can see what vibrationally needs to get done today. That's the other part of it. We humans, as human consciousness, we want to impact what we want to do today. It's all about us. If you ever question what consciousness and which aspect is talking to you when you're talking or when a person's talking, if it begins with what I want to do, I'm going to do this because I want to get this done. If there's an I in it anywhere, it's the human consciousness. That's the only perspective it has. It's how it's coming out in the whole thing, right? It doesn't care about anything else, doesn't care about anybody else. It just cares about how it's doing. How am I doing in this? Am I doing okay? We're good. If I'm not doing okay, then, we got some problems. But if I'm okay, this is all good, That's the human consciousness. And that's all it really cares about is how it's doing and what it wants to do. And I've seen so many, and I used to do the same thing, but when you get away from that consciousness and you're operating from a different consciousness and you look at humans doing this, you see why when you did it, it was just as chaotic as when they're doing it. And it almost makes you look at it and say, how can anyone live that way when you should live that way? And it's kind of that reverse when you see it. You're like, well, I used to do that all the time. Like, just slow, just I want to do this day, this day, this day. No matter what happens, these are the 6 things I'm going to get done today. No matter how much the universe, and that's just your universe, throws it back at you in a sense going, this is not what you're supposed to do today. Go do this today. Go do this tomorrow. But today you're going to just do this 1 or 2 things. You're not supposed to do all this other stuff today. You might have a project you're doing and all of a sudden you feel like maybe I'm not supposed to get back to it for a couple of months because the frequency's not right. We start to understand that the aspect of what you've embodied for the day and the aspect of the frequencies of that day are going to depict what you're going to do. And you're not sling in a lot of stuff that's not supposed to be done, because when you try to do that, you collapse time. One, you're almost fighting against yourself. So you're fighting against the frequency of the way the frequency wants to go and what you're supposed to do today. You're fighting against that to get all this stuff done that you feel like needs to be done today. You want to get all this stuff done today. You want to get the garage cleaned out. You want to get the cars washed. But it's just not the day for that. And you don't have the vibrational frequency, the energetic support for that today. You might make upgrades. There's a lot more our bodies can do now than before 2012. 2012 is when solar activity shifted, when we started getting blasted with a lot of solar activity, when all of a sudden we are now able to expand our consciousness way more than we were ever able to do before and embody that consciousness. None of that was available before. So you're trying to, in the beginning it's difficult because we're trying to use our human mind, yet try to be what we feel like living an ascended life. And it doesn't work that way because you can't do both. They're different frequencies. So we tend to collapse time a lot. The time collapse is something you will notice and notice and notice. And you will notice that when you go back and you have days where you have put stuff back to back, you learn repeatedly not to do that. You learn repeatedly, don't leave 20 minutes before you have to be somewhere and to think there's going to be no traffic. Because even if you live where there's 7 cars in the area you live in a totally remote area, there will be road work. There will be something else put there so you will understand you're collapsing time yourself. You're putting all these obstacles in your way. You're adding obstacles in because you're not giving any of the moments time to breathe where they can flow. You're not allowing it to flow. You're trying to force the flow by planning and planning and planning and planning and planning. It never works out. It never works out. You can never do it. And a lot of the reasons why we want to feel like we have some type of master in time. Like we can do it. And sometimes we feel like we're a slave to time. You're going to go through different iterations of it. Based on our human consciousness, we feel like time is this, I don't really love the word, but I'm going to use it. We feel like it's some kind of entity, right? That it's something that we can't beat in a sense. We look at it as an obstacle. We look at it as something that it's going to get us eventually. That time always comes back and bites us in the bum, out of it. You can't freeze time. Even though we try to freeze moments, we can get stuck. We can't really freeze it. We can just get stuck in a moment when everything else keeps rolling. Time becomes something we start to move through. We let it move through us in a sense. We understand the cadence of time. We understand how we are. We can shift how we move through it. We understand that bringing in a lot of people is going to collapse time. We still might need to be around a lot of people that day, but we understand that's going to collapse time. Meaning, if I want to get 6 things done with this group of people today, maybe we get 2 things done. Maybe we don't get either of those things and we end up doing something completely different. Because we're collapsing the time. Now, there are situations where you might go in and talk to someone, and if you're having a conversation, it's a higher consciousness conversation, everyone's frequency is raising, you might feel like, wow, that seemed to have lasted a long time, or it passed quicker. A lot of times, especially I noticed a lot when I was in my earlier days, you would talk about some of these concepts, and it would feel like it's been 10 minutes and it's been 4 hours. right? Because in that moment, you're almost operating outside of time. You're not really, it's kind of there, but you're not bound by it. It's not the controlling thing that it is in our human consciousness, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it takes, if it takes 20 minutes or it takes 6 hours. It doesn't matter. It's going to get done when it gets done, and the rest of it is more our internal monologue of why we feel like, why did it take that long? Why do I not like the fact it took that long? If I've been working on a project for a while now, and I was getting frustrated with myself. I just didn't want to pick it back up again. And now I've got some different ideas about a different way I want to take the project. And I didn't have that frequency before to go there to figure out what I wanted to do with it. I would have just done something that wasn't the highest for me to the highest frequency, the highest timeline, the highest I could go. I wasn't there yet. So we have to kind of keep in mind that no matter how we construct our reality, we are the ones that are going to move through time however we want to move through it. We have to be conscious of the fact it's there, but we're not beholden to it. It in a sense is something that we ally with, and we can move through. We can slow down. If we know we have a lot of stuff to do one day, we know we have to slow it down. We have to slow time down. There's going to be a lot of times when I'm going to be completely by myself for a week, and I'm like, okay, I need this week to feel like 3 weeks. Because I want to get so much done, but I need to feel like I've had 3 weeks by myself, not 1 week. I need to slow it down. And you can have that conversation with yourself before the week even starts. I want to slow all this down. I need everything to get I want everything to get slow and quiet so I can get what I want to get done. I can feel completely rested and ready to go on to the next reality when it comes in. So we do have that sense to do that. But we don't have that when we get when our brain go, and I found myself doing with one thing in particular. I still kind of I have all these things I want to do prior to this one thing I have to do, and there's no way I have time to do it all. There's no way I have time to drive over there, drive back, get ready to go on camera in 15 minutes, and be ready to go on camera. Yet I've done it like the last few months. I've kept doing the same thing, and I'm like, why do I keep doing this? And that's something I'm like, I don't know. Why do I keep doing this? It's trying to shift that because it's not working. It's not working the way I'm trying to get it to work. It's not flowing the way I want it to flow. But I'm the cause of that. Because there's no way we can get all this stuff done in the time we want to get it all done. You're going to find that you ditch alarm clocks after a while. You don't need them. I only will use an alarm clock if I have to be somewhere for someone else and I want to make sure I don't miss it. Then I will use an alarm clock. If it's just our humans think, I want to be up by this time, because these are all things that get ingrained in us. I need to be up by this time. You will be woken up when it's time for you to be woken up. And that's pretty much how it is. You will get to where you're supposed to be getting to when you're supposed to get there, when you flow with the day. But our human consciousness doesn't allow us to flow with the day. It wants to control the day. I have to get up at 6 a.m. I have to do all these things. And I'm running. And it even doesn't matter how early our human gets up. It's overstacked the day. It's overplanned the day, because we also don't see other people that were impacted by doing that. And that was a big one for me to realize, as someone in my human consciousness that was always showing up late. And I still do that time to time again, unless it's something that a course I'm going to teach, a session I've got to do. A lot of the stuff I'll do for free. Sometimes I'm not as punctual as I'd like to be with it. Some days I can be, and the other days I'm like, 15, 20 minutes. I'll get there when I get there. Content, I find myself I do that with. The paid stuff, because you understand that there's more accountability there in a sense. And you want to make sure you get, you're there on time. You start to understand how you running is impacting everybody else. And everyone else in your field. And that kind of brings you back around to how we kind of started. In our human consciousness, we don't think of others. We don't even think they're there. We don't care how we impact them. We don't care anything about them. It doesn't matter to us. We wash our hands of it. it doesn't matter. You know, it is this fallacy that we care about other people. We really don't. We don't care how we affect other people. It doesn't matter to us. We want to get what we've got to get done, and it doesn't matter. But as you start to realize that when we collapse time, we're putting so much pressure. And that's another thing that starts to happen with the system. Our universe will show it to us. You see it happening a lot with the collectives now. The systems get a lot of pressure. And you see more and more pressure just pushing it and pushing it and pushing. It's like a pressure cooker, you know? And that's what starts to happen with us. We start to feel that. You feel the pressure to do this, do this, do this, do that. But those are all very human. Your universe is going to press on you, but it's not going to pressure you. You know, and there's a distinction there. It's not going to build up all the stories around what happens if you don't do it. But you will know this is important to do. I need to do this. I need to knock out this reality to get this out of the way. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can do this today. I have the energy to do this thing. This thing might not have to be done for 3 months, but I have the energy today to do this thing, so let me do this thing. You don't go in chronological order. That's the other thing that will collapse time for you. Trying to go and I'm going to do A, B, C, and D first. Stop doing that. That will also collapse time because you're using your mind once again. You're using your brain to kind of figure it out. Realities don't. Your days are reality. It doesn't construct that way. You know, time speeds up and slows down all throughout the day because you're shifting your frequency all throughout the day. It might take you forever to get somewhere because now you're sitting in traffic. And what happens? The minute you're trying to get somewhere, there's traffic, right? And we're like, why does that always happen? Because we create it, right? We created all the stress. We put so much stress into it. We pushed this whole thing together. Now we're just a pressure cooker. So all we're putting out is just a pressure cooker. So now we're going to sit in traffic and just explode, right? And because we didn't allow all the time, you know, all the time that was needed to do all the stuff we had to do. We feel like it's so funny, and I know now when I'm planning. Except for that one thing, this one thing that I'm going to be really transcending this year. I have to plan like 3 or 4 times the amount of time I think it's going to take. If I think it's going to be 10 minutes, I'm going to give it an hour. Because one, we don't move as fast anymore. So even in our human consciousness, we might have been able to just make it. We just made it. You find that you can't do that anymore. You can't even, because you almost shut off that brainwave state in a sense, and you can't even access it anymore after a while, so you can't rush, right? Even if you know you're losing time now. You know, the time is running out in this reality. I've crushed it, I waited too long. It's collapsing on me. That's basically what happened. It's collapsing on us. And now that I've waited too long, you know, I can't speed up. You know, we lose the ability to speed up. So not only do we look at, you might even find yourself going back and looking at all the things you could get done in the day. And now you try to do all that stuff in a day and you're like, I can't do all that anymore. Like I couldn't do all this stuff if I wanted to do all that stuff in the day. And it's not so much you can't do a lot of stuff in the day, you might be able to do that order of stuff in the day. You know, you can maybe do a lot of stuff in the day, but it's different. It'll be different things you can kind of match together to do. These things match together with this frequency right now. They might not match together in the afternoon, but in this morning, these things match together. You might have to go do something to even get yourself in the frequency in the morning. I know for me, I have to get out of the house in the morning. That gets me in the frequency I need to get into to then come back and do what I need to get done for the day. I can't stay in the house and do that. The house is too crowded, right? I can't be in here and get where I need to get to. I have to go. So I'm going to check the chat. There's one other thing I do want to touch on. Hello. Okay. I don't have any questions. I will take questions if anyone has questions. I wanted to touch on something I saw. We're going to leave time. We're going to leave our whole time discussion now for a while. Well, I might get back to it at some point in a different video, but we're going to leave that for now. I want to talk about something I saw on, I watched this YouTube channel, The Why Files, and they go to different topics, and then they try to debunk them at the end. But some they can't debunk, some they can. But one thing that's always interesting to me is how science tries to explain what's happening with ascension. It's trying to take logical science and explain ascension. And one of the things they were talking about in one of these latest episodes was, how did man evolve the way they did? How did all of a sudden they go from not being able to do anything to all of a sudden we have cell phones and all this other stuff, not too many thousands of years later, we're now doing all this other stuff. How did that happen? And they were talking about, they started eating fungus, and they started being able to expand their minds, and they started being able to do all these things they couldn't do before. And that's one of the reasons, right? And it started me just kind of thinking of all the things that they were saying that happens when people, and use DMT is another one people use. It shifts the brain chemistry. It shifts your frequency. It opens up your. And they were saying the longer you did it, the more it started to retrain your neural pathways. That's a frequency shift, right? If you shift your frequency long enough, your brain starts to reorganize. You start to tap into parts of the brain. Beginning of this episode of the show I watched, they were like, okay, they thought at first the brain was expanding or growing or something like that. Then they were like, no, maybe they're just tapping into parts of the brain they don't use. They're able to access parts of the brain. Happens just during ascension. That's what's happening. You hold a higher frequency long enough, your body starts to rework, your brain starts to rework. All of a sudden, a lot of people would do a lot of these psychedelics and say, well, I could see my place in the universe. And it sounded ridiculous to people. Like, how can you know all this stuff all of a sudden? They couldn't hold the frequency, unless they were doing certain things to be able to do that, but they were able to tap into the frequency. And if you can tap into the frequency long enough, you do rewire the brain, you rewire the body. That's when you get into all the physical stuff that comes along with ascension. So I thought it was pretty interesting to just to see how science starts to evolve to get back to what's happening to people just naturally. We talked about the 2012, the big stuff that happened around 2012, where all of a sudden we could embody higher consciousness because the frequencies are changing, the energy's changing. All of a sudden we're able to hold higher consciousness. We're able to embody in higher frequencies. We're able to clear the lower densities from our body based on the frequency of the earth changing, the solar activity changing. Our bodies are changing. Our consciousness is raising. Whether you've started your journey or you haven't yet, everyone will at some point go through it. It's just a natural path. Now, will there be some people who die and come back in a different body and go through ascension in that body? Sure. Not everyone's going to go through it the exact same time in the exact same way, and I've done numerous videos on why we can't. We can't have everyone going through what feels like you're losing your mind when you go through your ascension, parts of your ascension process, because it's so different than your human consciousness when you start tapping into. They even talked in that show about how what happens is the ego starts to die. You stop caring so much about just you, and you start looking at how you fit into the whole. And that is a lot of a sudden. The ego self starts to, and not so much dies off, it's no longer the piece that makes the choices anymore. It's no longer the part of you that's making the decision. It is no longer that. It's part of your consciousness in a sense. It's the unconscious part of your consciousness, but it's still there. It's just not the mouthpiece. It's not the aspect you're living your life from anymore. So it's quite fascinating when you start to see science running around a lot of these topics. Not fully putting it all together yet, but because that's science, and when they talk about ascension and higher consciousness and all that, that's more metaphysical, woo-woo kind of stuff in a sense. But they are finding there are common paths when they talk just about higher consciousness in general. They just haven't got to the place yet where they understand 100% of what's going on yet. How much, you able to do, how much you are able to shift and change and see how you are all of a sudden connected to the whole. And that was another thing they said when people were doing a lot of these experiments they did. People felt more connected to the whole, and that's what happened. That's going to loop us back around to the whole time thing. You feel more connected. You feel more connected to everyone because you understand when you try to do it this way, this way, this way, this way. Why isn't all this working? You know, it also makes you trim out the stuff that's not that important in your life. You know, because you understand I've got all these things I need to do, and I need so much time to do all of them. And some of the stuff I really don't want to do, and why is that? Alright, I think I'm going to end on that today. So, I will see everyone, hopefully I'll be back next week. Keep practicing the art of intuition, and I'll see you later. Bye.